The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by intelligent beings. It floated in the empty space between three star systems. A massive station where the 12 ruling species of the galaxy met to discuss matters of trade, war, and peace. Crystal pillars rose from the floor to the ceiling, each one carved with the history of a different civilization. Holographic displays showed the faces of billions of viewers watching from 1,000 worlds. Ambassador Linda Torres stood at the center of this magnificent hall, feeling very small and very alone. She was a woman of 53 years. With gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes from too many sleepless nights, behind her sat the rest of humanity's diplomatic team. 7 men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment. For 300 years, humans had worked toward this day. They had discovered faster than light travel, colonized dozens of worlds, and built a civilization that stretched across an entire arm of the galaxy. They had made contact with alien species, learned their languages, and followed every rule the Council demanded. All they wanted was a seat at the table, a voice in galactic affairs, and the protection that came with full membership. High Arbiter Zithos looked down at Linda from his elevated platform. He was a creature of nightmares to human eyes, standing 8 feet tall with 6 limbs and a head covered in compound eyes. His species, the Vorthan, had ruled the Council for 10,000 years. They saw themselves as the wise elders of the galaxy, guiding younger species toward enlightenment. Linda saw them as bureaucrats who had forgotten what it meant to suffer. The Council has reviewed humanity's requests for military assistance, Zithos said. His voice translated into English through Linda's earpiece. We understand that the Krell Dominion attacked your colony world of New Helsinki. We extend our sympathies for the lives lost. Linda felt her hands tighten into fists. 40,000 people had died on New Helsinki. Her brother Marcus had been among them, along with his wife and their 2 children. She had received the news 3 weeks ago and had not slept properly since. However, Zithos continued, the Council cannot authorize military action against the Krell at this time. They are valuable trading partners, and their aggression toward humanity may stem from misunderstandings that can be resolved through diplomatic channels. A murmur ran through the human delegation. Linda heard someone whisper a curse behind her. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. High Arbiter, with respect, this is not an isolated incident. The Krell have raided human shipping lanes for decades. They have destroyed 3 of our colony ships. They have made it clear through both words and actions that they consider humanity to be prey, not partners. Zithos waved one of his limbs dismissively. Young species often face challenges as they establish themselves. The Council faced similar growing pains in its early centuries. Patience and diplomacy are the paths to lasting peace. Patience? Linda's voice rose slightly. We have been patient for 300 years. We have followed every protocol, met every requirement, and asked for nothing more than basic protection. And now 40,000 of our people are dead because you refused to act. The hall went silent. No one spoke to the High Arbiter in such a tone. The other council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their various alien bodies displaying signs of surprise and concern. Zithos leaned forward, his compound eyes glittering. Ambassador Torres, you forget your place. Humanity has not yet earned full membership in this council. You are observers, nothing more. Your species is young, impetuous, and prone to violence. Perhaps if you had not settled in Krell territory without proper authorization, this tragedy could have been avoided. Linda stared at him in disbelief. New Helsinki was established in unclaimed space, following every guideline your council provided. We did nothing wrong. Our people died because you allowed the Krell to murder them. That is enough, Zithos said coldly. The council's decision is final. Humanity must resolve this conflict through peaceful means. Military assistance will not be provided. Linda stood very still for a long moment. Around her, the great hall hummed with the quiet sounds of 1,000 diplomatic observers waiting to see what would happen next. The crystal pillars gleamed in the artificial light, beautiful and cold and utterly indifferent to human suffering. She thought about her brother Marcus. He had been a teacher, a gentle man who loved poetry and spent his weekends volunteering at the colony's youth center. His daughter Emma had just turned 7. His son Lucas had been learning to play the piano. They were all gone now, burned to ash when the Krell bombers descended on their peaceful city. Linda reached up and removed the translator earpiece from her ear. The action was symbolic but powerful. Without the device, she could not understand the alien languages spoken in the hall, and they could not understand her. She placed the earpiece on the podium in front of her. For 3 centuries, humanity has come to this council seeking friendship and protection. We have been patient. We have been respectful. We have followed your rules and accepted your decisions even when they harmed us. Her voice was quiet but clear, carrying through the hall's perfect acoustics. Today, that ends. We came here seeking justice for our dead. We came seeking allies who would stand with us against those who prey upon the weak. What we found instead was indifference, excuses, and blame. She stepped back from the podium. Humanity withdraws from these negotiations. We withdraw from our observer status on this council. We withdraw from every treaty, agreement, and understanding we have signed with you. The hall erupted in confused noise. Delegates shouted questions. Zithos demanded that she return to the podium, but Linda was already walking toward the exit, her delegation falling into step behind her. Admiral Kevin Price was waiting in the corridor outside. He was a tall man in his 60s, with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He had commanded humanity's small defense fleet for 20 years and had argued against diplomatic solutions from the beginning. They refused. He asked, though he already knew the answer. They blamed us, Linda replied, her voice flat. They said we provoked the attack by existing in the wrong place. Kevin nodded slowly. Then it's time for Plan Omega.
Yes,
Linda said. May God forgive us for what we're about to become. Within 6 hours, every human vessel in council space began moving toward the Sol system. Diplomatic stations were abandoned. Trade agreements were canceled. Communication channels went silent. The galaxy watched in confusion as humanity retreated into its own territory and sealed the borders behind them. High Arbiter. Zithos dismissed the withdrawal as a tantrum. The humans would return, he assured the council. They always did. Young species lacked the patience for true isolation. He was wrong. Humanity was done asking for help. They were done begging for protection. They were done following rules that only applied to them, while others killed their children without consequence. From this day forward, they would protect themselves. And when they finally returned to the galactic stage, they would never be dismissed again. The silent years had begun. 50 years passed in silence. The Galactic Council celebrated at first. The troublesome humans had retreated to their little corner of space, no longer making demands or asking difficult questions. Trade routes adjusted around human territory, and life continued as it always had for the great civilizations of the galaxy. High Arbiter Zithos retired after 20 years. Satisfied that he had handled the human situation correctly, his replacement was a Maladrian named Counselor Thesa, a being who resembled a tall, slender figure made of flowing silver liquid. She was considered wise and fair by most species, and under her leadership, the Council entered a new era of prosperity. But there were whispers in the dark. Places between stars, scout ships sent to observe human space, never returned. Spy drones went silent the moment they crossed the invisible border that humans had drawn around their territory. Long-range sensors detected strange energy patterns that no one could explain. It was as if humanity had wrapped itself in a blanket of darkness and pulled it tight. Some council members grew concerned. They suggested sending diplomatic missions to re-establish contact. Others argued that humans were probably destroying themselves through internal conflict, as young species often did when isolated. A few warned that something dangerous might be growing in the silence. Counselor. Thesa listened to all opinions and decided to wait. If humans wanted to hide, let them hide. The galaxy was vast, and there were more important matters to address than the fate of one primitive species. She had no idea. What was happening behind that wall of silence? On the human colony world of Armstrong? Named for the first person to walk on Earth's moon. Commander Grace Palmer stood on the observation deck of Orbital Station 7. She was 42 years old, with short brown hair and eyes that had learned to see threats everywhere. Through the massive windows, she watched construction drones assemble warships in the shipyards that stretched for thousands of kilometers. When humanity retreated from the galaxy, they had brought everything with them. Every scientist, every engineer, every teacher and farmer and builder. They had pooled their resources and focused on a single goal with an intensity that surprised even themselves. They would never be weak again. Lieutenant Commander Daniel Hayes approached with a data tablet in his hands. He was Grace's second in command, a quiet man with a gift for logistics and planning. The new shield generators passed all tests, he reported. We can withstand sustained fire from Krell dreadnoughts without significant damage. The weapon systems are even more impressive. Our main cannons can punch through anything the Council has. Grace nodded but did not smile. How many ships do we have now? 1,200 capital ships fully operational, 3,000 support vessels. And the Omega defense platforms are online around every colony world. The numbers were staggering. When humanity had left Council space, they possessed perhaps 50 military vessels, most of them outdated patrol craft. Now they had an armada that could challenge any power in the galaxy, but ships were only part of the story. In a research facility, deep beneath the surface of Mars, Dr. Samuel Burke worked on the project that would change everything. He was an old man now, with white hair and hands that trembled slightly when he was tired, but his mind remained sharp. His determination had not weakened in 50 years. The device before him looked simple, almost disappointing. It was a cylinder about 2 meters tall, covered in sensors and emitters that glowed with soft blue light. But inside that cylinder was the most advanced technology humanity had ever created. He called it the Cascade Engine. His assistant, Patricia Ellis, entered the lab with 2 cups of coffee. She was in her 30s, a brilliant physicist who had dedicated her career to this project. The final calibrations are complete, she said, handing him a cup. We're ready for the full power test. Samuel took the coffee, but did not drink. He stared at the Cascade Engine with an expression that mixed pride with deep unease. Do you understand what we've built? He asked quietly. This device can disable every ship in an enemy fleet simultaneously. It disrupts their power systems, their weapons, their engines. One pulse, and thousands of vessels become helpless. Tricia nodded. It's the ultimate defensive weapon. We can stop any invasion without firing a single shot. The ultimate offensive weapon, Samuel replied. We could conquer the entire galaxy if we wanted to. Disable their fleets, then destroy them at our leisure. No one could stop us. The thought hung in the air between them. For 50 years, humanity had prepared for war. They had built weapons that could crack planets and shields that could shrug off nuclear strikes. They had trained soldiers who feared nothing and commanders who planned for every possibility. But what would they do with all that power? Patricia touched his arm gently. We're not like them, Samuel. We never were. We built these weapons to protect ourselves, not to conquer others. I know, he said. I just hope our children remember that when the time comes. 3 months later, the test was conducted in deep space, far from any inhabited world. The Cascade Engine performed perfectly, disabling a fleet of drone targets spread across millions of kilometers. The pulse moved faster than light, reaching every ship simultaneously. Regardless of distance, humanity had created a weapon that made them invincible. Admiral Kevin Price, now 80 years old, but still commanding the fleet, received the news in his quarters aboard the command ship Defiant. He had waited 50 years for this moment, watching friends grow old and die while they prepared for a conflict that might never come. Is it ready for deployment? He asked. Yes, Admiral, came the reply. We can install Cascade engines on every major warship within 6 months. Kevin closed his eyes and thought about Linda Torres, who had walked out of the council chamber so long ago. She had passed away 10 years earlier, but her words still echoed in his memory. May God forgive us for what we're about to become. He opened his eyes and straightened his uniform. Then we're ready, he said. Begin final preparations. and start monitoring the borders. The next time someone threatens our people, we will be ready to respond.
Far away.
In the comfortable halls of the Galactic Council, Counselor Thesa approved another trade agreement and dismissed another warning about the silent humans. They were irrelevant, she believed. A minor species that had chosen to isolate themselves. Rather than accept their place in the natural order, she could not have been more wrong. The silent years were ending. And when humanity finally emerged from their self-imposed exile, the galaxy would learn a lesson it would never forget. Some species break when pushed too hard. Others become something. Stronger than anyone imagined possible, humanity had become. Unbreakable, the Krell Dominion had ruled their sector of the galaxy through fear for 1,000 years. Their warriors were bred for combat from birth, their ships were designed for conquest, and their cultures celebrated violence above all other virtues. When they attacked human colonies 50 years ago, they expected the primitive newcomers to collapse within a generation. Instead, the humans had vanished behind an impenetrable wall of silence. Warlord Crexus was tired of waiting. He was the greatest military commander in Krell history, a massive reptilian creature covered in scars from 100 battles. He had conquered 6 species and added their worlds to the Dominion. Now he wanted to add humanity to his list of victories. The humans have hidden long enough, he declared to his war council. Their isolation has made them weak. Their numbers have dwindled. Now is the time to finish what we started. His advisors agreed eagerly. Intelligence reports suggested that humanity had perhaps 200 military vessels, barely enough to defend a single system. The Krell invasion fleet would crush them in a matter of days. Crexus assembled 8,000 warships, the largest armada in Krell history. Dreadnoughts the size of small moons, cruisers bristling with weapons, and countless fighters ready to swarm any resistance. He led them personally. Eager to claim the glory of exterminating humanity, the fleet crossed into human space on a cold morning by Earth's calendar. Sensors detected nothing at first, just empty space and distant stars. Crexus smiled, convinced that the humans were hiding in terror. Then a single ship appeared before them. Admiral Grace Palmer sat in the command chair of the Defiant, watching the Krell fleet fill her tactical display. 8,000 vessels against one. By any reasonable calculation, she should turn and run. But Grace had not become an admiral by being reasonable. Open a channel to the Krell flagship, she ordered. Her communications officer complied. And moments later, the scarred face of Warlord Crexus appeared on screen. He looked at Grace with contempt, his yellow eyes narrowing. "One ship," he said, his voice heavy with mockery. "You send one ship to face my armada? Are all humans this foolish? Or just you?" Grace kept her expression calm. "This is Admiral Grace Palmer of the United Human Fleet. You are in violation of sovereign human space. Turn back now, or face the consequences." Crexus laughed, a harsh barking sound that hurt human ears. "Consequences? You have nothing. Your people are finished. When I am done here, there will be no more humans. No more colonies. No more memory that your pathetic species ever existed. You've been warned," Grace said simply. "What happens next is your choice." She closed the channel before Crexus could respond. Around her, the bridge crew waited in tense silence. They all knew what was about to happen, but knowing did not make the moment any less terrifying. "Activate the Cascade engine," Grace ordered. Deep within the Defiant, systems that had been built over decades came to life. Energy gathered in the core of the ship, swirling and building until it reached critical mass. Then, with a sound like distant thunder, the pulse was released. Blue light rippled outward from the Defiant in an expanding sphere. It moved faster than any sensor could track, washing over the Krell fleet in an instant. And wherever it touched, power died. Crexus watched in horror as his flagship went dark around him. The lights failed. The engines stopped. Weapons powered down. Life support switched to emergency reserves, providing enough air to survive, but nothing more. It was the same across his entire fleet. 8,000 ships, the pride of the Krell Dominion. Drifting helplessly in the void, Then the rest of the human fleet arrived. They emerged from hidden positions throughout the system. 1,200 warships decloaking simultaneously. Each one was larger and more powerful than anything the Krell had ever built. They surrounded the disabled invasion force like wolves circling wounded prey. On the Krell flagship, emergency power flickered to life. Enough for communications, nothing more. Crexus stared at his tactical display, watching human vessels take position around his helpless fleet. A message arrived from Admiral Palmer, or Lord Crexus. Your fleet has been disabled but not destroyed. Your soldiers are alive. Your ships can be repaired. This does not have to end in death. Crexus gripped the arms of his command chair, claws digging into the metal. What do you want? I want you to go home. Tell your leaders what happened here. Tell them that humanity is no longer prey. We have the power to destroy you, but we choose mercy instead. Do not test that mercy again. For a long moment, Crexus said nothing. Pride demanded that he refuse, that he die fighting rather than accept such humiliation. But he looked at his crew, at the warriors who had followed him into what they believed would be an easy victory. They did not deserve to die for his pride. How do we leave? He asked, the words bitter in his mouth. We will restore basic power to your engines. You will have enough to reach Krell space at minimum speed. Your weapons will remain offline until you cross the border. It took 3 days for the Krell fleet to limp home. 3 days of traveling through human space, surrounded by vessels that could destroy them at any moment. 3 days of shame that Crexus would carry for the rest of his life. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. The humans had returned. They had faced the mightiest invasion force ever assembled and defeated it without losing a single ship. They had shown mercy to enemies who would have shown them none. Everything had changed. On the Galactic Council, panic set in. Counselor Thesa called emergency sessions that lasted for days. Military advisors presented analysis that made her blood run cold. Human technology was decades ahead of anything the Council possessed. Their weapons could not be blocked. Their ships could not be tracked. And they had clearly been preparing for this moment for a very long time. What do we do? Demanded Delegate Vorn of the Droken. They will come for us next. They will destroy us all in revenge for how we treated them. But the humans did not come. Instead, a message arrived from Earth. It was addressed to Counselor Thesa personally, delivered through diplomatic channels that had been silent for half a century. The message was simple. We do not seek revenge. We do not want war. We want only what we asked for 50 years ago, a seat at the table, a voice in galactic affairs, and the right to protect our people. If you are ready to discuss these terms, we are willing to talk. It was signed by President Anthony Marshall, leader of the United Human Government. Thesa read the message 3 times before she believed it was real. After everything that had happened, after 50 years of isolation and one devastating demonstration of power, the humans still wanted peace. She began drafting her response, knowing that the future of the galaxy depended on what happened next. The humans had proven they could destroy their enemies. Now they would prove they were better than those enemies had ever been. The galaxy held its breath in the months following the Battle of the Border. Every species waited to see what humanity would do with their newfound power. Some expected conquest. Others predicted isolation. A few hoped for reconciliation. The Vexery slavers expected nothing at all. They were too busy counting their profits to worry about distant human affairs. The Vexery had operated in the shadows of galactic civilization for centuries. They captured beings from vulnerable species, broke their spirits through cruelty, and sold them to wealthy buyers who wanted servants that could not resist. The Council officially condemned slavery, but did little to stop it. The Vexery were careful to target only species without powerful protectors. Slave Master Kyrus thought humans would make excellent slaves. They were strong, intelligent, and adaptable. More importantly, they traveled in small groups through the border regions, making them easy targets. His ship intercepted a human transport vessel near the edge of explored space. The crew of 47 people, including families with children, were captured without a fight. Kiris examined them with satisfaction, already calculating how much he could charge for such exotic merchandise. He never reached the slave market's captain, Nathan Cole of the Destroyer. Relentless had been tracking the Vexery ship since it entered the region. He was 35 years old, with a reputation for boldness that sometimes worried his superiors. When he received word of the captured transport, he did not wait for orders from high command. "Set course for the Vexery base," he told his navigator. "Maximum speed." His first officer, Lieutenant Maria Santos, looked up from her station. "Sir, that's deep in Vexery territory. The Council considers them a protected trading partner." Okay. Nathan turned to face her. "The Council can go to hell. Those are our people, Maria. We're bringing them home." The Relentless crossed into Vexery space without permission. It moved through their systems like a ghost, sensors detecting patrol ships, but never being detected in return. Human stealth technology had advanced far beyond anything the slavers possessed. The Vexery base was a station hidden in the asteroid belt of an uninhabited system. It had operated for 200 years without discovery, processing thousands of captives from dozens of species. Security was minimal because no one had ever come looking. Nathan studied the station's layout on his tactical display. The human captives were being held in a detention block on the lower levels. But sensors also detected hundreds of other life forms throughout the facility. "Other slaves waiting to be sold. We're not just rescuing our people," he said quietly. "We're rescuing everyone." Maria nodded, her expression hardening with determination. "I'll lead the boarding team." The assault began at midnight by station time. The Relentless disabled the station's defensive systems with surgical precision, then deployed shuttles carrying 40 soldiers in advanced combat armor. Maria led them through the airlocks and into the corridors beyond. The Vexery guards were unprepared for what hit them. Human weapons cut through their defenses like paper. Human soldiers moved through the station with perfect coordination, securing each section before advancing to the next. Within an hour, the entire facility was under human control. Maria found the human captives in a large cell block, huddled together in fear. When she removed her helmet and spoke to them in English, a woman began to cry with relief. "You came for us," she whispered. "They told us no one would come. They said humans didn't care about their own." "They were wrong," Maria replied. "We always come for our own." But Maria did not stop there. She moved through the station, opening every cell and cutting every chain. Maladrian prisoners too frightened to speak. Droken captives who had given up hope years ago. Young members of species Maria did not recognize. Taken from worlds that probably still mourned them, she freed them all, slave master. Kairos was found hiding in his private quarters, surrounded by wealth stolen from his victims. He tried to negotiate when Maria's soldiers broke down his door. Offering credits and information in exchange for his life, Maria looked at him with cold contempt. There is no negotiation for freedom. Kiris was taken into custody along with his entire crew. The station's records were secured as evidence, and 600 former slaves were transported to the Relentless, where they received medical care and their first real meals in months or years. The rescued beings were offered a choice: return to their homeworlds or seek asylum in human space. Most chose asylum. They had seen how humanity treated its enemies with mercy and its victims with compassion. They wanted to live under that protection. When news of the raid reached the Galactic Council, the reaction was explosive. Delegate Vorn of the Droken demanded sanctions against humanity for violating Vexery sovereignty. Ambassador Zora of the Melodrians quietly thanked the human delegation for rescuing her people. Counselor Thesa struggled to maintain order as the assembly descended into chaos. Through it all, human representative remained calm. Her name was Catherine Brooks, a diplomat who had trained under Linda Torres decades ago. She sat quietly while aliens shouted at each other, waiting for the noise to die down. When it finally did, she stood and spoke. The Vexery kidnapped 47 human citizens. They intended to sell them as property. We recovered our people and discovered hundreds of other victims in the process. We freed all of them, who had no authority to enter Vexery space. Vorn protested. We had every authority to protect our people, Catherine replied. If the Council had done its job, the Vexery would have been shut down centuries ago. You chose to look away. We chose not to. The words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Every delegate knew that Catherine was right. The Council had tolerated slavery because confronting it was inconvenient. Humans had ended a 200-year operation in a single night because it was the right thing to do. Counselor Thesa made a decision that would define her legacy. The Council formally thanks humanity for their intervention against the Vexery criminal organization. We acknowledge that our inaction allowed this situation to develop, and we commit to doing better in the future. It was not an apology, not exactly, but it was an admission of failure, spoken before the entire galaxy. It was more than anyone had expected. After the session ended, Thesa requested a private meeting with Catherine. They sat together in a small conference room, two beings from very different worlds, trying to find common ground. Your President Marshall sent a message after the Krell battle, Thesa said. He said, humanity still wants peace. Is that true? Catherine nodded. We never wanted war. We wanted justice. We wanted to be treated as equals. When we were denied both, we left. When we were attacked, we defended ourselves. When we found innocents in chains, we freed them. None of this required malice toward anyone. Thesa studied the human woman carefully. What do you want now? The same thing we wanted 50 years ago. A seat at the table. A voice in decisions that affect our people. The right to protect ourselves and others without being punished for it. And if we agree to these terms... Catherine smiled slightly. Then perhaps we can start building something better than what came before. A galaxy where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. Where justice is more than a word used in speeches. Thesa was quiet for a long moment. She thought about the Council's history, its compromises and failures. She thought about the humans who had been wronged terribly and still offered mercy to their enemies. She thought about what the galaxy could become if beings like these were given real power. I will speak to the Council, she said finally. I cannot promise they will agree, but I will try. Catherine stood and extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. That's all we've ever asked. Thesa took her hand, her silver fingers cool against human skin. The reckoning was not over, but for the first time in 50 years. There was hope that it might end in something other than destruction. The negotiations lasted for 2 years. Diplomats from humanity and the Galactic Council met on neutral ground, arguing over every word and every provision. There were moments when the talks nearly collapsed, when old grievances and fresh fears threatened to destroy everything. But both sides kept returning to the table, driven by the understanding that the alternative was far worse. Admiral Grace Palmer attended many of these sessions as a military advisor. She was in her 70s now, her hair fully gray and her steps slower than they once were. But her mind remained sharp, and her presence reminded everyone what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. General Thraxis of the Maladrian Defense Corps sat across from her during one particularly difficult session. He was a warrior from a species that valued honor above all else, and he had initially opposed any accommodation with humans. But watching Grace over the months of negotiation had changed his opinion. You could have destroyed the Krell, he said during a break in the talks. 8,000 ships, helpless before you. Why did you show mercy? Grace considered the question carefully. Because killing them would not bring back our dead. Because their soldiers were following orders just as ours were. Because proving we were stronger than them meant nothing if we could not prove we were better than them. Thraxis was silent for a long moment. My people have fought many wars. We have never shown such restraint to a defeated enemy. Maybe it's time to start, Grace replied. The Galactic Reformation Treaty was signed in the year 2401. 54 years after Ambassador Linda Torres walked out of the council chamber. The ceremony was held on Earth, in a building constructed specifically for the occasion. They called it Unity Hall. Under the treaty's terms, humanity received permanent membership in the Galactic Council with full voting rights. They would have a voice in every decision that affected galactic affairs. No longer observers, no longer petitioners, equals. But the treaty went further than anyone had expected. New laws were established against slavery, piracy, and unprovoked military action. These laws had existed before in theory, but now they had enforcement mechanisms with real power. A joint military force was created, drawing ships and soldiers from multiple species. It would be commanded by both Admiral Grace Palmer and General Thraxis. Working together to protect the weak and punish aggressors, President Anthony Marshall signed the treaty on behalf of humanity. He was an old man now, approaching the end of his third term in office. He had guided his species through the final years of isolation and the difficult transition back to galactic society. This moment was the culmination of his life's work. "Today we write a new chapter in galactic history," he said during the signing ceremony. "For too long, this civilization has operated on the principle that might makes right. The strong have exploited the weak, and the Council has looked away because confrontation was inconvenient." He paused, looking out at the assembled delegates from 100 worlds. "That era ends today. From this moment forward, every species in this alliance commits to a simple principle: we protect each other. Not because it is easy, not because it is profitable, but because it is right." The audience applauded, though some did so reluctantly. Change was frightening, even change for the better. Many delegates wondered if this new order would last, or if old habits would eventually reassert themselves. Among the crowd, Linda Torres watched from a wheelchair near the front of the hall. She was 93 years old now, her body failing but her spirit unbroken. Catherine Brooks stood beside her, ready to help if needed. When the ceremony ended, Counselor Thessa approached Linda's wheelchair. The Meladrian leader had aged as well over the decades, her silver form now touched with darker streaks that indicated advanced years. "Ambassador Torres," Thessa said formally, "I want to apologize. On behalf of the Council, on behalf of all the species who failed your people when you needed help." Linda looked up at her with eyes that had seen too much suffering and just enough hope. "The apology is appreciated, Counselor. But it does not bring back the dead. It does not erase 50 years of fear and preparation for a war we hoped would never come." "No," Thessa agreed softly, "it does not. But perhaps it can be the beginning of something better." Linda was quiet for a moment, watching the delegates mingle. Lieutenant Maria Santos was there, now a captain, laughing at something a Meladrian officer had said. Admiral Palmer stood with General Thraxis, reviewing plans for their new joint command. Young diplomats from a dozen species exchanged ideas and contact information. Building relationships that might shape the next century? "Perhaps it can," Linda said finally. "Perhaps that is enough." That evening, alone in her quarters, Linda recorded a message for the historical archives. It was a tradition among human leaders, leaving words for future generations who might need guidance. Today, humanity received what we asked for a century ago: a seat at the table, a voice in galactic affairs, the right to protect ourselves and others. But we did not receive these things through patience alone. We received them because we became strong enough that we could not be ignored, compassionate enough that we could not be feared, determined enough that we could not be stopped. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Let this be a lesson to any species who believes the galaxy will give them justice freely. It will not. You must earn your place among the stars. You must be willing to stand alone when no one else will stand with you. And you must never, ever forget who you are. She saved the recording and sat quietly in the darkness, thinking about everyone she had lost along the way. Her brother Marcus and his family burned to ash on New Helsinki. Admiral Kevin Price, who had died 3 years before the treaty was signed. Countless others who had worked and sacrificed and never lived to see this day. "We did it," she whispered to them. "We finally did it." Linda Torres passed away peacefully 6 months later. She was buried on New Helsinki, beside the memorial to those who died in the Krell attack. Her tombstone bore a simple inscription: "She walked out so others could walk in." The galaxy continued to turn, as it always had. But it was no longer the same galaxy that had dismissed humanity as primitive newcomers. The Allied response fleet patrolled the borders, keeping the peace. The new laws against slavery shut down criminal operations across dozens of systems. Species that had once feared each other now worked together, slowly building trust that had never existed before. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect. There were still conflicts, still injustices, still beings who wanted to return to the old ways. But the foundation had been laid for something better, something that might last for generations if people continued to fight for it. Admiral Grace. Palmer retired 5 years after the treaty was signed. She spent her final years writing a history of humanity's transformation, hoping that future generations would understand both the cost and the necessity of what had been done in the final chapter. She wrote words that would be quoted for centuries. When the Council abandoned us, we had a choice. We could have surrendered to despair. We could have become the monsters they feared. Instead, we became something else entirely. We became the protectors we wished someone had been for us. We became the example we wanted others to follow. We proved that strength and compassion are not opposites, but partners. She concluded with a simple truth that summarized everything humanity had learned. The galaxy will test you. It will push you to your limits and beyond. It will make you choose between what is easy and what is right. When that moment comes, remember this. The measure of a species is not how they treat their allies. It is how they treat their enemies when they have the power to destroy them. We chose mercy. We chose justice. We chose to be better. And the galaxy was never the same.